if I put the HTS code in there for festive Christmas articles and made a sweater out of that. So that's what I did. I ordered it. And then the funny part really was, well, the funny part to the trade geeks anyway, is that when I got it, I realized that, you know, the design on the sweater probably doesn't even put it in that category.
Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Folks, we're ready for another show of Simply Trade Podcast. We've got a good show going on today, and it is after the holiday season and all that, but we've got some funny stuff that we're going to take a little kind of like a boomerang approach. Is like something happened this past holiday and it's coming back, and we're going to have some further discussions on how to classify something that would be, is it festive? Is it a garment? Is it what? So I'm looking forward to some of this. But Lalo, how are you doing? It's we've been doing some really cool shows lately and lots of comments. So you got anything to say about our YouTube channel?
No, just that it's picking up steam. So it's actually, we're really excited because we decided at the start of the year that we'll commit a lot more time to it, and it's actually paid off. If y'all haven't gone, just go look for it. It's at Simply Trade Pod, and go look for our channel there, and you'll see full episodes. You'll see what are called shorts. And then we also have something called gems, trade gems, which is really cool because they're little segments of the biggest takeaways of every show. I mean, and those can be 1 minute or it could be 13 minutes, 15 minutes, however long it goes. But that's just a snippet of the show. The two kind of like get you the best of the show, the best highlights of the show if you don't have time to watch the whole show, and then later you can go watch the whole show. But it's a really neat way to look at our shows. And secondly, we're bringing back every single episode that we had from day one. So we're up to about 160 episodes now. So anything before 100 and maybe 40 are archived somewhere. So we're just bringing them all back and just bringing them onto the platform. So that's really cool. So we're trying to be a little more visual and give you all more of the show that we can. So yeah, and people are commenting, so it's really cool. Just start a conversation there online. I mean, that's the best way to talk to us, I guess.
Well, I will say that, folks, we've had some really neat shows in the past, but we've got some really great ones that have started out here in 2024. And Lalo and I have plans for, I'm glad this is going to be a good year for our podcast show and for you listeners, because we're going to be doing probably a few more public appearances. We're going to be doing some really cool shows on different topics. We're expanding our markets, if you will. We'll get into that at some point here in the near future. So with that, thank you for your listenership. Thank you. Please continue to subscribe, share us, like us, do all those kinds of things. So with that, let's move on to our guests. We've got a fellow by the name of Ryan Bennett on. And Lila, you want to introduce Ryan for us?
Sure. So back around Christmas, I was just scrolling through my feed, and this feed was trending. And in fact, I think LinkedIn told me that this feed is trending. I don't know, it might have had a hashtag or something. I don't remember how, but it showed up in my feed. And it said, go comment to get more views or something like that. So I went in there. And so then I found Ryan Bennett. He's from Fluke. The company's called Fluke. And they, he can tell us what they manufacture, but it had nothing to do with anything that they manufacture. He had his really cool sweater, Christmas sweater, with the HTS classification of that sweater and the description of the tariff number. And so people were just like all over the place. I mean, I think it had like close to 200 likes and quite a few comments. I mean, 50, 60 comments, I think it was. And it's just entertaining to watch trade geeks go at it because it's just like left and right. No, it's this. And no, well, it depends on that, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe we'll talk to Ryan a little bit about that. And maybe we'll talk about a few other things. But the one thing, Andy, that I'm mostly excited to have Ryan here is because we have made it a goal for us to have practitioners on the show. We have a lot of great guests. I mean, and there's no denying we have really good guests, but most of them are service providers. And of course, they're the ones that are in the trenches with the practitioners. And I know it's a little more sensitive sometimes to have a practitioner on the show because, they may not need to or be able to give out information they might be deemed as trade secrets or whatever. And we, Andy, you and I, we know we don't touch on that, and we try not to. In fact, we stay away from that. We just like to know what are best practices, what are some trade hacks, anything having to do with helping the trade community, and that's what this show is all about. So, if any one of you, I'm sorry, are practitioners, like if you are an import-export compliance manager or trade compliance manager, whatever it might be, for a company and not a service provider, please reach out. We would love to have you guys on, and we're glad that Ryan decided to come on. So Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So Ryan, where are you located?
I'm located in Everett, Washington, so just north of Seattle.
So in the Pacific Northwest, huh?
Yes, it's a lovely time of year here where it's 45 and raining every day for about 6 months straight. But yes.
It's one of those, do y'all do the deal where you put on the yellow tinted glasses to try and fool yourself to like,
yeah, the artificial sun lamps coming in, and yeah.
I had a stint up in Canada, in the Toronto area, and there's a period there where I think we were going like 45 days or 50 days without any sunlight. And I got to tell you, I could, coming from the South, you hear about cabin fever and different things. Like, you know what? You get to the point where when there's no sunlight, it really messes with you after a while. And I would put on those yellow tinted glasses, and I had about a 40-minute drive from my house to my office. And it actually kind of helped. I noticed that by the time I got to the office, I kind of had a more upbeat, it made me look like kind of a little bit of a sunshine or whatever, as weird as that may sound. So I feel for you folks up there in the soggy Northwest.
Yeah, thank you. It's it was 60 degrees last week, so you never know. But we're having kind of a warm winter, but still rainy. So yeah.
Well, I got to say, folks, if you're listening to this, Ryan has on a sweatshirt that is obviously a festive Christmas holiday type of design on the front of this thing. And with that, why don't you explain a little bit what you were doing with your post? I'm sure it started out as nothing more than just kind of a comical little, let's see what happens. And I guess you were surprised by the reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking for something to wear to our holiday party. So I work for Fluke Electronics here in Everett. I'm the director of global trade compliance, specializing in customs and import. And I've got a co-director who specializes in export and sanctions. Just looking for something interesting to wear. I was trying to think about, could I do something trade themed somehow? And started looking online and found a couple places where you could upload your own design or wording and create a holiday sweater. And I thought, hey, what if I put the HTS code in there for festive Christmas articles and made a sweater out of that. So that's what I did. I ordered it, and then the funny part really was, well, the funny part to the trade geeks anyway, is that when I got it, I realized that, the design on the sweater probably doesn't even put it in that category. It would probably just be classified as a general garment. But I used to work for a couple of retailers, and we used to import a lot of Christmas merchandise. So I remember many conversations arguing over, what's considered festive and not. So this kind of brought me back to those days. And I work with a lot of trade geeks. I'm from a customs brokerage family. My grandfather was in brokerage. My mom was a broker. So this is kind of my humor area, I guess.
Well, it's just for our listeners. Let me just say this real quick. On the front of it, he's got this border, if you will, around it, and it's 9505 10 50 20. So that comes out as I'm looking here, articles of Christmas festivities and parts and accessories thereof, all the way down to 50 20, which is what, other?
Other, yeah.
Kind of other.
When in doubt, go with other. Is that still the unofficial GRI?
There you go. So, with that said, I guess have you looked at with the trade geeks? There's no doubt. I always hear this deal with, and we've done a couple of shows that were hilarious last year and then this past year, talking about how Santa Claus is probably one of the top smugglers in the world. And secondarily to that he has broken so many FAA rules and regulations, international borders of lack of declaring manifest and things. So all that to say, now we have this one here, and so I again, have you looked at the comments and were you surprised with that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I was just surprised at how many people really saw it and reacted to it. I guess that maybe shows there's a market for trade, holiday themed trade clothing. But yeah, the conversations did get pretty interesting, and just amongst my colleagues, and then also online. Everybody had an opinion about whether the classification was accurate and whether that makes it more or less of an entertaining garment. But the unofficial rules, I think, are that if you're going to have a reindeer, that the just a general reindeer doesn't put it in Chapter 95. It has to be like Rudolph or something very closely associated with Christmas. You can't have just a regular tree. It has to be decorated as a Christmas tree. So I didn't pay a lot of attention to the design until I got the sweater in the mail and realized, oh, you know what? This probably doesn't even qualify for the HTS I put on here. But, probably 99% of the people that looked at it wouldn't know that anyway, but it's a little trade geek detail.
It's funny, Ryan, because I'm reading the comments right now. People are saying, whatever it is that they're saying. And then some people are like, Killjoy.
Yeah.
Not to you, but to the people that are trying to say that this is not the right classification. And I like this one. This is it says, this guy says that it's the ultimate dad joke. In other words, I guess this is this tops most dad jokes, it says. Which is true. That's what we do as dads, right? We make corny stuff like this, but it's awesome.
Well, there's with the GRIs, I guess it comes down to as I was, and I am not a classifier. I was like, man, I'd screw up a 2-car parade again with this on this kind of stuff, but I think the GRI one, if there's a HS for it provided for, that's what you need to use if it is a lower number, especially as far as the priorities. If you have a couple of different classifications, customs always wants you to go with the lower number, not the higher number, I think, in the book. But there again, I can probably have that wrong too. So.
Well, yeah, it gets tricky when you're talking about utilitarian versus, decorative. Like, would somebody wear this sweater year round? I might, but most people probably would not.
Well, and here's the other thing, though, with that Christmas thing in there, and especially, all right, let's say if you add some flashing lights to it. Now, what do you do?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, let me wear this Christmas sweater to a Easter deal. No, it ain't gonna work.
Yeah, you could go a lot of different ways with it, and I think I think the conversations it sparked were pretty interesting, and this is what trade people live for, right? Arguing over HTS codes. This is what we do.
You didn't wear that to your family Christmas party, right? Because your mom and grandpa would have probably been like arguing, and
it probably would have caused a little bit of an argument. Yes, I did not wear it.
Son, that's not it.
Yes,
but you can make an argument that those are the only icons that you had available for you at the time, and it does mean Christmas. So.
Right. And, isn't that the whole thing in classification is what can you argue and justify, right? I think that's probably why a lot of us like it so much, because you can really get into some good conversations and making an argument one way or the other.
Right. Well, tell us a little bit. You're dealing with the are you responsible for both import and export compliance?
Yes, ultimately, yes. So I handle, all of our U.S. imports and exports for sure. Then I support our global customs operations.
Okay. And in the electronic side of things, I'm sure then you're doing definitely a lot of entries and things of that nature. Are you utilizing any FTZs by chance, or are you clearing it in, selling it only in the U.S., or what do you got?
We're clear. We don't have any FTZs. In my previous role, I managed a couple of FTZs. But Fluke manufactures in the U.S., Europe, and China, and then we have global distribution. So we are everywhere.
Are there any other types of, rather than just normal consumption entries, are there any other international tools that you're utilizing, such as like a carnet or, in-bond transfer?
Not if we can help
thing?
We do have a couple products that we've utilized carnets for when we've got some service products where one of our technicians will go out to a customer's facility and take some pretty expensive tools with them, and we'll utilize carnets for that occasionally.
Oh, it's a big savings when you're saving the duties and taxes on that. Those carnets are a great tool and actually help to stimulate some international trade, whether you're a repairman going out and transacting something there, or you're trying to take your product and sell it and whatnot. But all that to say now is that with what you're trying to do, I guess, Ryan, what would be some of the things that your challenges in the role that you are dealing with? There is so much frickin' A drama in the supply chain world in today's situations and whatnot. What would be some of those, valuable pennies to hang on to say, this is what we deal with, or how I keep up to speed, or keep my staff sane, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I'm not sure I've been successful at keeping my staff sane. I would say I've been in this role for a little over 6 years now, and I've been, in the industry overall for 32 years, and I would probably say this has been the busiest, most complex, 6 years that I've seen in terms of, the complexity that's coming into new regulations, just the geopolitical tension, the constantly changing environments. I feel like we've just been trying to keep up for the last few years. And like you mentioned, of course, supply chain challenges in the electronics industry, we've definitely seen a lot of that over the last couple of years. That's, starting to calm down a bit now. But it's a challenge just to keep things going, let alone try to look for savings, right? So we try to utilize free trade agreements where we can. We don't have any foreign trade zones. It just hasn't made sense for our business model yet. But that's something we're constantly reevaluating and looking at. And yeah, some days it's all we can do just to keep things moving in and out, and keep that supply coming in with the shortages and transportation challenges and all of that. I think we definitely try to, it's always been one of my personal goals to have trade be an advantage and not be, a hindrance on the business. I think when you do trade correctly, you should be a cost savings or an efficiency savings, not, a lot of times we get a reputation as being the bad guys who keep coming in and saying,
it's like
no, you
those
can't do
compliance
that.
guys are always the naysayers and all that. So to that point, have you built a relationship with other departments, or are you finding out at the tail end and then have to be that pooper scooper at the end of a parade to kind of clean something up, going, if you just let me know it?
Yeah, I think, we push as much as we can to get at the table and get in these conversations early on so that we can provide some input and hopefully save some of those situations where we're having to come in and clean up afterwards, or, where we're rushing at the last minute to get things done. Obviously it's definitely easier when you get involved earlier in a transaction or a change to the business. The Section 301 tariffs that came into place in 2018, we were heavily involved in business decisions around trying to avoid as much of that as we could. And I think, and that was fairly early in my tenure here at Fluke, and it got me in front of the right people who now know, hey, they can pick up the phone and call Ryan when they have a question about trade, or, they know that I can help make things easier for them. And I'm, that's a reputation you have to build and relationship you have to build, I think, over time. But I think we have it here. And
Has there been anything that in reaching out on that takes time, to literally sit down and meet with folks or whatever, during some of the pandemic scenarios there too? You've got the other issue of it's hard to just get up from your desk, walk down the hall and go, hey, Joe Smith, what are you doing here or whatever? So how did you open up the door to network with folks?
I think, I was lucky, like I said, especially with the Section 301 tariffs, we had a lot of cross-functional projects going on that got me in front of a lot of the right people, where I was able to kind of keep up that conversation. And it was very challenging during COVID, once we were working remotely, that you can't just walk down the hall and ask somebody a question. You really got to try to keep up those conversations. Some of the departments that I work with real closely, we try to have regular meetings on the calendar. Sometimes we cancel them if we don't have anything to talk about, but just keeping that conversation open is very helpful. And also coming to people when it's not a problem, right? Hey, I just read about this regulatory change that could affect you, and so let's sit down and talk about it, rather than waiting till, hey, this thing's going to affect in 30 days and it's going to completely change what you're doing, so we got to figure out a plan. Like, trying to get ahead of things as much as possible, and also trying to be flexible. And we have regulations we have to meet. We have compliance obligations, and our job is to protect the company. But you can't always say no, right? Sometimes it's, no, we can't do that, but we can do this, or no, that's not going to work, but what if we tried it this way? And then you start to get a reputation as not the guy who just says no to everything, but the guy who will work with you and find solutions that fit within compliance. But maybe it's not the first idea the business had, but in the end, you get what you need to accomplish.
Well, with that, okay, so as you're looking at things, you mentioned the 301 tariff, so that's obviously been predominantly a focus on China manufactured goods. So whether your goods are wholly manufactured in China or components thereof and whatnot, and those types of challenges. Has your company looked at trying to diversify its sources for these same items?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I would think everybody has at this point. Especially in electronics, so much of our components and finished goods were hit with the tariffs. And where it's made sense to make changes, we've definitely done that. But then we also have some more regionalized sourcing strategies. It's just, I think it's a time right now of a lot of change and a lot of companies looking at that, especially companies that were heavily resourced in China, of how to balance things out a little bit more and how to get those backup sources in place.
Yeah, you can't just turn a switch and the other source is like, yeah, and you don't want to do that. Actually, you phase it in or have a balance of volume. And well, let me ask you this, Ron, as you're looking at that, the move to diversify, your sourcing, would you say that the 301 tariffs were the main driver of that, or do you think the legislation on the anti forced labor type, forced labor prevention legislation has been more of a factor in that?
I would say that the tariffs were probably the first catalyst that we needed to really have some backup sources. And I would say actually more than the forced labor regulations or any sort of regulatory changes, just the supply chain challenges during COVID, when so much of China was shut down, was a huge wake up call that, like, hey, we got to have some backup here. We got to have some different sources and be a little bit more agile in how we get our products and our components.
Yeah, I was going to say, because isn't that like even nowadays geopolitical factors come into play, right? I mean, you're in Asia. If you're going to Europe, you're not going to want to go through the Red Sea and stuff like that. So I'm sure that also is a driver for you guys today.
Well, and another is with the geopolitical tensions. Obviously, U.S. and China is one. Hence, Lalo just mentioned the Red Sea with the Middle East. You got another scenario, though, that is looming out there, and that is the China-Taiwan situation. And that, Taiwan's another major, supplier of some goods, whether directly if you're importing from there or, Taiwan's making components that go into something else and whatever else. Has that been in some strategic discussions, I guess, as a whole and come in as a factor of the threat?
Yeah, I think at a high level, yeah, those, that's definitely on our radar. We have to pay attention to all that, all those geopolitical issues that could impact supply or impact strategy around sourcing, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, how do you keep your staff up to speed on things?
Good question. We get all the regular newsletters and things like that from our service providers, and we have a couple of outside law firms we work with very closely that keep us updated. At Fluke, we have a parent company called Fortive, and the trade teams at all of our different operating companies work together very closely to try and keep each other updated. So hopefully, if my team doesn't catch something, another one of our operating companies' trade teams will see it and update everyone. So I think we've built a good culture of compliance here and communication that we try to keep everyone in the loop.
Do you try and divide up like your staff to, I guess, maintain a certain expertise in a particular area rather than trying? I mean, to me, it's overwhelming for one person to think they're going to stay up to speed on everything. And you got your exports, you got your imports, you got your sanctions, you got the, like you said, the special tariff 301s and 232s. You've got the geopolitical situation. You got the Far East versus Europe versus North America, that kind of thing. How do you look at that? Do you guys get together and say, all right, I'm going to assign you yeah, you want to try and get up to speed, but assign you a certain particular area and let them, keep up to speed, and then give a briefing to anybody that's on a hot topic.
So we do a little bit of that. Our export team divides up the globe by territory. So, I've got one person who's responsible for Europe and the Middle East and part of South America, and then another person who takes on the APAC region and part of South America and North America. So they try to stay up to date regionally on what they need to know. And then we have a network of our employees around the globe who may not, trade compliance is not their primary function. They may be in finance, they may be in logistics, but they do trade compliance support work. And these are the people who are on the ground and getting us information, from their service providers about what they're seeing, what kind of issues they might be seeing, what's coming down the pike in terms of regulatory changes. So that's one thing we've been working on building here, and we're going to be doing a lot more of that this year, is trying to really connect that global network and get people regularly communicating and sending out information to the rest of the company about what they're seeing and what we need to be getting prepared for.
And what about outside your company, like the trade community in general? Like, do you are you a member of like other associations and stuff like
ICPA? Yeah, a lot of our people are ICPA members. We try to keep up there. AAEI, we've got a few people involved in that organization as well. And our compliance function sits in the legal department, so we work with a few outside law firms that are very good at keeping us updated and bringing us in the loop when they see something that might impact us. But yeah, it's pretty much the same as most people, just subscribing to as many newsletters as we can and trying to stay ahead of things and so that we don't get to, hey, this is going into effect next week, what's our plan? And of course those situations come up, but we try and stay ahead of it as much as possible.
By chance, have you and your staff listened to our show very often?
I guess I should have said that first, right? We keep up with the Simply Train podcast.
All right. I'm going to spank you with the left there. Okay.
Yes. I have been a horrible... I go out and subscribe to a bunch of podcasts, and then I look at my phone, and it's like, I've got 30 episodes to listen to all of a sudden. So I've been trying to get better about keeping on some things in the headphones at work during the day, and there's a lot of great information out there. You guys have been great at, keeping up with what's happening in the trade world and getting some good guests on that have a lot of great insight. So that's the podcast resource is another one that we've gotten into. Some of our people are better podcast listeners than others, but it's definitely a great resource out there.
Well, and I appreciate that. The one thing that, Lalo and I both, we spend a great deal of time every single week, and we'll talk several times during the week. How can we make the show better? What can we do? Are we hitting the topics that people seem to enjoy? Are we presenting it in such a manner that people seem to, get some entertainment along with some good information and whatnot? So hopefully that's, again, transcending to you and your team. I will say that we also have had, and I've mentioned this a few times, Lalo and I were very humble. We've had some people tell us that they have put our show on their intranet, the link to the show, and they require their staff to literally listen to our show. So it's one of those things that again we take that, we're very humbled by that, but it's like, wow, that's a big responsibility, because it's people have used our show as an education type thing to say. They've also forwarded a link to a specific show to upper management or somebody in a different department, say, we've been talking about a certain project. Listen to the show, and then we'll talk more after it. And it may be something that we're presenting that will help educate them on a certain issue. So hopefully that'll continue on with something like that with y'all.
Yeah, I know on our internal Teams channel, a lot of times if somebody comes across a particular podcast or article or something that they think is relevant, and people post it out and share it within our internal trade teams, and I see that more and more.
Well, then there's always the deal is like, listen to this show. Andy's full of beans. Here he goes again. It's like, uh-oh. But
I don't know how much information you guys get about your listener demographics, but do you think that, I think trade has been kind of a hot topic the last couple of years from more and more people outside the industry. Do you see kind of a general interest in what you're doing?
Most of our listeners are like you, Ryan, that are like in the trenches, that they know the industry, and we do have some, maybe a handful that we know of but it's kind of hard to tell because in the marketing world where we're involved in, Apple has changed a lot of their privacy, and you kind of tend not to know a lot information like you used to before. So anytime you're listening to our show on an Apple device, which or an Apple app, which ironically ours is mostly listened to on Apple Podcasts on that platform, and so we're kind of like very limited on what information we get. But yeah, I mean, from what we see, the good news is that we do reach the people who really need to listen to this, and that's refreshing, because when we go like to ICPA, we'll be there in March, and people come up to, hey, your show's great, I can't believe you're here, blah blah blah, stuff like that. It's funny to see that. I sit here and talk, and so does Andy, and we just go on our day. I don't see like if like we're that big of a deal, other than we do put out a show. But anyway, but yeah, so that what we do know is that most of our listeners are in the trenches, trade geeks like yourself, like the Ryans of the world. So that's what we do know for sure.
And we've had, especially with the service providers, I think they love coming on the show, but we'll, talk to some of them. And in particular, if there's a software package or a service that somebody's offering, what seems to happen is, and again, they're telling us this, we don't know, but they're saying, they're getting phone calls from people or contacted from our listeners going, hey, I need your service, or I have a question or whatever, and whatnot. And it has been really well. So Lalo and I go, well, somehow we need to capitalize on this a little bit. Maybe we need to get some more advertising going here.
So, we need a finder's fee or something.
There you go. So, hey, folks, if you want to advertise, come to us right here at Simply Trade Podcast any day. Yeah, okay. But all that to say, we do take our show very seriously. And the point being is, out of all that, listening to what you're going through, I mean, the other scenario there is what would be, I'm curious, I'm sure you have new products coming on board all the time, or you're evaluating the new products. Ryan, are you and your team involved in the, I guess, assessment of the product itself and where it's going to be maybe manufactured? Or is it, hey, we've already got a source on it, it's going to be manufactured, now you need to classify it or do something with it? Or how early in the process are you on new products?
We get involved very early in the process on new products. We have a whole documented process here that the product team goes through, and the trade team is involved very early. The same with like our patent team, or in the design stage of a product. They may not know at the time where it's going to be manufactured or a lot of details, but we're looking at the product, in a concept stage.
All right, so let me then go into this, is that because this is one of the things where a lot of compliance folks unfortunately find out after the fact that a new product's developed, they'll source it, they're looking for just the cheapest way to manufacture it, but then they're There's the transportation now has gone up, or there's higher duties and taxes because of it's not in a trade agreement country, or whatever the case may be, and they're not looking at it holistically. But what's bad is for the product to have been shipped and arrive at a port somewhere, whether it's ocean, rail, truck, air cargo, air express, and it comes in, it's like, well, how are you going to classify this thing? We don't know anything about it. A new part does not just happen. It takes weeks, if not months, for a part to come into fruition with most companies. It's designed, it's looked at, it's whatever. At some point, it's going to be entered into your parts tables. It's going to be offered for your customer service folks to be able to take customer orders. It's going to be given to the sales side so they can get out there and sell it. And, the port compliance folks out here and all that. So take us through your processes that, since you're involved early, have you been able to, in your opinion, I guess, get ahead of things so that things are streamlined and you avoid, shall we say, a crisis or an exception along the way by being involved early?
Yeah, I mean, there's always exceptions and things that fall through the cracks. But I think, for the most part, we've got a really tight new product introduction process where we've got, I think we keep trying to bring it down a little bit. But I think it's a 14-page questionnaire that the product team fills out in regards to export controls and classification. Yeah, some of that it's not like, it's not like 14 pages of writing paragraphs. Some questions and some, there's some flow charts. It's not as intimidating as it looks, but it's a very detailed questionnaire.
But it's bringing in more than just your import or export type thing. You're looking at things. They like, where's it coming from? Where's it going to? All that kind of stuff as well, as far as that, or is it all related to your entry type?
It's kind of a staged project. So, in the initial design stages of something, we're looking at, okay, what's the function? What kind of, audience or customer are you designing this for? Is this going to be something designed for the military that we need to look at ITAR? Is this going to fall under the EAR in terms of export controls? Then, what's the function? What are you making it out of? Kind of getting at least an early HTS classification that tells, those two things tell us then how we're going to deal with the process as they go through the new product creation. And then we'll check in later on, and we've got what they call toll gates or steps in the project where different groups in the company have to sign off on the new product. So we're looking at it at a couple different phases and collecting as much information as we can, and then making sure that everything is in the system. So when it's time to ship, that all that information is in there. Now, do we get to a product launching and getting ready to ship and there's no HTS code or ECCN? Yes, that does happen. But we've got controls in the system then that would keep the shipment from going until we
and that's one of the things that folks, I guess, talking to our listeners here for a minute, is that you don't need to design the perfect process and hold everything up. It's like you got to take what run with it as far as you can and all. But here's one of the things. I mean, you design your ideal situation. In a perfect world, you go through that process and say, okay, have we got everything covered? But then you start building in your secondary and tertiary things that, not if, but when something goes off the tracks, if you will, in the process, handling that exception and getting it back into the flow is part of the scenario of what to do. I've seen too many people, something gets off track and then they take it as a one-off, and the next thing you know, constantly all these one-offs are going, it's like, no, get it back into the flow and let the rest of the process take over, and now you're dealing with the next exception if you have to deal with it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. You can easily get into a situation where the exception becomes the rule, and what you thought was a one-off emergency, okay, I'm going to do this for you, push this through, then becomes, you get asked that every time, and you've got to really, like you said, you got to take it back into the process, trust that your process works and make sure everybody understands, the importance of the process and that it works a lot smoother when you follow it.
As far as your career goes and all that, and we didn't talk about, how you got where you're at, but basically, if you could go back and talk to your 25-year-old self, what would be maybe the top 1, 2, or 3 items that you would say and impart wisdom from what you know now and say, all right, kid, this is what you ought to be looking at and doing?
Well, so I think I think I have a unique sort of road to where I got because I grew up in Blaine, Washington on the Canadian border, very heavy commercial traffic port and a very small town. And we sort of create customs brokers there. So I started in the business when I was 16, working as an evening release clerk for a broker. And I did brokerage for about 15 years before I came over to working for an importer, and now I've been on that side for several years. So I think at 25, I probably would have. I think I got my license around the time I was 25. I probably would have learned more about exports earlier on in my career. That's something I didn't do until about 6 or 7 years ago. And I would say you just got to learn as much as you can. I've worked for brokers and freight forwarders, so I've got a little bit of that knowledge on the transportation side. And then coming over and working for an importer, learning things from that side of the business and bringing in that transportation knowledge. And then just kind of getting yourself into as many meetings and discussions as you can, learning about sourcing, learning about legal, learning about just all the different aspects that trade touches in a business so that you know how to talk to those people and sort of move them over to your side on compliance. I think that's probably the best thing that I ever did in my career was just get myself in as many as those conversations as possible and pick up as much as you can so that you learn, how to talk to people about compliance when you need to and that you can speak their language a little bit.
Well, the ability to translate complex into simplistic terms is an art form. So
will serve you very well if you can do that. Yes.
You would probably just mention real quickly to your younger self when that time comes to, in your career when you want to make a Christmas sweater to make sure that it's make sure you get better festive icons
yes.
well, no, either way. I mean, you probably nailed it. You just need better icons, better graphics, or the other way around.
I'm gonna have to make like the 2.0 version next year that's a little more accurate.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
watch for that.
You got red and green. You got a couple of moose and a couple of what appears to be Christmas trees and snowflakes. I mean, hey.
I haven't worn this since Christmas, so I don't think it's a year-round use item, but customers might disagree.
Exactly, yeah. You would have a good argument there. But anyway, thanks, Brian. That was awesome, and we really appreciate you coming on the show and just chatting with us. I mean, it's like we use our slogan was shooting the ship on all things trade, and that's pretty much what we were doing here.
Hey, folks, we appreciate your listenership. Ryan, thank you for being a guest on our show. And with that, hopefully you found some nuggets of knowledge taken away from what Ryan is going through in his life and career and all that. And if you are interested seriously in advertising with us, please reach out to us. The other is, I got to say, if you want to become proficient in some of the things, the Global Training Center has got some phenomenal courses that are online, they're in person or whatever, that are well worth looking at. So with that, from Simply Trade, we greatly appreciate you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.